So the Maine is really going to be sort of that sort of straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, in the relationship, because the Jangoists are really going to have a field day here. They're sort of going to anticipate and get super excited and hawkish about what the United States is going to do in retaliation, despite the fact that there was absolutely no proof that Spain had anything to do with the sinking of the Spain. It's all sort of circumstantial evidence and speculation. And, well, in fact, we'll find out later in the 1970s that probably Spain had nothing to do with it. But the fact of the matter is that wasn't really the sentiment that's going on. There's a lot of Jangoists here. Remember TR's quote from yesterday saying that we could use a little bit of a war here. So that this is sort of an instance where American hawkishness is really going to create a war. And it's a little bit ironic because if you go back to way back to the time of John Quincy Adams, he says something along the lines of that we should respect independence and freedom for all, and that we should not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. So when we're talking about, remember about the Monroe Doctrine, which Quincy Adams actually authors, he's sort of saying, look, we can stay out of Europeans' business. We don't need to go looking for monsters to destroy. But here we have a monster that, in the form of Spain, that we're going to go try and destroy. So you sort of see the way that Spain is depicted here in the political cartoon, bleeding with the bloody sword over the dead bodies and the sailors of the Spain. So types of cartoons like this is a good example of the yellow journalism that's going on. These, of course, are being printed in Hearst and Pulitzer's newspapers. Speaking of newspapers, here is one of them. So the Maine explodes, caused by bomb or torpedo. You can see here that the headline doesn't mention at all that it may have just been some coal or some gunpowder or something inside the Maine itself. This is either a bomb that was subvertly placed on there or a torpedo from the outside. So this drumming up of war is really sort of the sentiment at the time. And it goes so far as a congressman, a House of Representative members, on the floor says something along the lines of, it ought to be understood in Spain, and it ought to be understood by every other country in the world, that while we, the United States, desire to be at peace, that we are prepared for war if war becomes necessary. So this is sort of the backdrop to which the Spanish-American War starts. And Spain will sort of provide the spark that we need, because they will actually declare a war on us. And they do so in response to a congressional resolution that recognizes Cuban independence and demands that Spain withdraw from Cuba. This is where, you remember, the Teller Amendment comes in. The Teller Amendment is an amendment to this resolution, and it says that the United States really didn't have any interest in Cuba. We're not going to annex them. We're not going to try to make them a state, that we would leave the government to the control of the island and its own people. But Spain's going to be pretty ticked off about this. They're going to be pretty ticked off that the United States is demanding that they leave Cuba. So they are going to break off diplomatic relations, and then in late April 24th, they declare war on us, and then the next day, April 25th, we in turn get a congressional declaration of war. So we're off to the races then with the Spanish-American War. And the first sort of move in the Spanish-American War actually comes in the Philippines. So here, and you can see the date here of February, this is even before the technical declaration of war. This is sort of in response to that February 15th explosion of the Maine. TR, who is now the Secretary of the Navy at this point, remember he hasn't become president yet, he's Secretary of the Navy, will order Commodore Dewey. Commodore, what a cool title. I always feel like Commodores should have big hats. But Commodore Dewey, he's going to order him to attack the Philippines as a response on the attack on the Maine. And so as it says here, the declaration of war had not happened yet. The declaration of war won't come until April. McKinley will sort of after the fact back up TR, and then war will eventually be declared. So what basically will happen is Dewey will attack the Philippines at Manila, and they win an easy naval battle. Now, this really isn't much of a fight, honestly. The span of the Spanish-American War is like a couple months. It's not very long at all. And a lot to it has to do with like the strong, new, industrial, sort of technological nation fighting on this weak, poor, old, ancient civilization in Spain. So a lot of Spain's military is outdated. They're sort of like in wooden ships compared to, looking at the Spain or the Maine. You can see it there in that photograph. So this is sort of not much of a war at all. So Dewey will easily attack and defeat and surround Manila, and then a few months later, the U.S. gets enforcements and actually ground enforcements and captures Manila itself. So this is going to actually end up being, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Philippines here after the Spanish-American War, but this is actually going to end up being sort of a big blunder for the United States. The Philippines will be. This will lead to a bloody war of Filipino independence. So the nationalists want their freedom from Spain, but then after the treaty that will, and we'll get into this here again in a second, but after the treaty with Spain, we actually take control of the Philippines, and they're not too happy about that because they were sort of expecting their freedom. So we'll see the results of this sort of blunder in the Philippines in a little bit. So here's a nice little map here. This is called the Splendid Little War, which is sort of weird that we're referring to a war as being splendid. But that's, again, part of the newspapers and the national sentiment at the time, that warmongering, that Djangoism, that idea that we're looking for a fight, sort of comes out of this. So we get the Splendid Little War, and here you can sort of see Dewey attacking from Hong Kong, and winning the battle in Manila and Manila Bay, and us easily and swiftly defeating the Spaniards in the Philippines as the first part of the Spanish-American War. So the victory here in the Philippines will lead to the formal annexation of Hawaii. There's some fear that Japan will try to take Hawaii while we were distracted fighting in the Philippines. So we annex Hawaii. And, with the war going on as well, we've talked about how Hawaii was sort of an important military stop. So we use this as that sort of necessarily refueling station for the Pacific Fleet. So this sort of brings an end to that Hawaii sort of question. I told you earlier or yesterday that they were going to be annexed a few years later in 1989. Or in 1898, sorry, dyslexic moment there. But this is what leads to that, is this victory. They don't want to feel like, oh, we're distracted in the Philippines, that leaves us open Hawaii. So they make sure that that is a formal state while this is going on. So again, here's some more yellow journalism and Djangoism going on here. You can see a lovely painting there of Dewey with his sweet stash. And, here's the world. So it says Dewey smashes Spain's fleet. So that yellow journalism, this sort of Djangoist attitude will persist even after the war has continued. So this will then again bring us to Cuba. We talked a little bit about Cuba before, and a lot of this before, but here's some, so you guys can actually take notes on this. McKinley basically wanted Spain out. So we give that resolution that basically says, hey, Spain, get out. And that original resolution actually authorizes McKinley to use action if to kick Spain out of Cuba if that's what they want for us. So McKinley will eventually get war. And of course, we talked about the Teller Amendment before. That was on your reading quiz for today. It's that sort of hedging your bets a little bit, so to speak, because we don't want to look too imperialistic. It's like we're imperialistic, but we don't look too imperialistic. So we say, look, we're just trying to free Cuba instead of actually trying to make them a colony or a state. And I always found this ironic that we are the source of Cuban independence, meaning the United States is the source of Cuban independence. When then we end up with this like huge feud when the Castro family, and they become communists and ally with the Soviet Union and the Bay of Pigs, and we'll get into that when we get into the 70s and Kennedy and whatnot, or not the 70s, but when we get into Kennedy's administration, we'll get into that a little bit more. But I always thought that was ironic, given the fact that we are the force that liberates Cuba. So the Spanish-American War, like I said, is a quick one. It's basically over by August. Spain will sue for peace in July, and it's over by August. So we go to war in April and we're done by August. I told you it would only take a matter of weeks. And Cuba is sort of the same way as the Philippines. Except Cuba is a little cooler because we get to talk about TR some more. I like TR. He is going to lead a group called the Rough Riders. Again, this is before he's president. He's going to lead a group of Rough Riders. The guy will actually, will literally resign his position as Secretary of the Navy so he can go and invade Cuba as part of these Rough Riders. And they fight at the Battle of San Juan Hill. And, you know, this is like the big battle that they have there. But Spain's going to lose all of the battles. About 17,000 American troops in all will be sent to Cuba, including the Rough Riders, which are led by TR. And, you know, really, it's humiliating. Spain suffers one defeat after another, and by July, they're suing for peace, and then on August 12th, we get the peace treaty. And what's important, this is actually an incredibly important peace treaty, because we end up taking Puerto Rico, we end up taking Guam, and we end up taking the Philippines. Which is actually a surprise. It's a surprise not only to the Americans, but it's a surprise to the Filipinos as well. So here we have a little bit of another little like war map of showing what's going on in Cuba. You can see Gitmo is down there. We're going to blockade the island, so we're going to try to basically starve the Spanish out. We have a couple of major victories. You can see where the Maine was sunk right there off of the coast of Havana. So just a graphical representation here. And then you can see the United States moving over to Puerto Rico from there. So that's why we end up with Puerto Rico as part of the peace treaty as well. And again, this is called the Splendid Little War, which is kind of odd. Here's a couple of photos of the Rough Riders. So famously, this is, again, part of the journalism that comes out of this. And this is really why TR gets a lot of his fame. You can see him in the middle of the photograph, dead center, and then sort of a painting of him riding through and winning some battles. So the Rough Riders, as I said, TR literally resigns as Secretary of the Navy so he can go to war. That's how sort of revved up he was about things. Of course, when there's a peace treaty, it's always in Paris, right? Why shouldn't we have 7,000 different treaties called the Treaty of Paris? So we have the Treaty of Paris. This is like the fifth one, probably, that we've talked about already this year. But this will end the Spanish-American War. It will technically free Cuba. And we stayed true to the Teller Amendment. We let them gain their independence. The United States, we get Guam, we get Puerto Rico. We also get the Philippines, as I referred to before, and this is going to become a problem, is what do we do with the Philippines? This is something, as we'll see here in a second, that it will literally keep McKinley up at night. This is a big question, because the Filipinos, they want their independence. They wanted their independence from Spain, and then once we take them, they're going to want their independence from us. But we're less than sort of thrilled about that idea. So we get this sort of issue of the Philippines that we'll talk about either later today or if not on Monday. But McKinley will eventually decide to take the island instead of giving them their freedom. They'll get their freedom in like the 40s. I think it's 46. But the natives are going to be super angry because they thought they were promised freedom, and there's going to be a revolt that will result in this. So I like this, right? This is a pretty sweet political cartoon. So you see McKinley there with his foot on the back of the neck of the Filipinos, and you have Napoleon and Caesar looking on, and the title of this, as you can see, is he to be a despot? So talking about McKinley there, obviously. So this idea here is, what are we going to do with the Philippines? How is this sort of national imperialism going to extend? So that's the question I'll leave us with today, because the Philippines will turn into its own issue, as I've alluded to. But we're running short on time, or at least I think we're running short on time. So we will leave the Philippines for our Monday's class and moving forward with imperialism there. So I hope you guys have a good weekend. Sorry for another boring video lecture, but we will get together back again on Monday and pick up where we left off.